The moment I saw my sister Delilah's hand on my husband's thigh at our family barbecue, everything clicked into place: the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in my marriage problems, the way she'd started dressing like me. But what made my blood run cold wasn't the betrayal itself, it was the way she looked directly at me and smiled while she did it, like she was marking her territory. My name is Anastasia Blackwood, and at 35, I thought I understood the boundaries of family loyalty. I'm a forensic psychologist who specializes in analyzing deceptive behavior for court cases, which means I'm professionally trained to spot lies and manipulation. The irony that I'd missed it happening in my own home wasn't lost on me, but then again, we never expect the people closest to us to be our greatest threats. Delilah is 2 years younger than me, and our entire lives, she's made everything a competition. When I got into graduate school, she suddenly decided she wanted to pursue higher education too. When I bought my first house, she immediately started house hunting in the same neighborhood. When I married Roman 5 years ago, she spent the entire reception telling anyone who'd listen that she could have done better for me. But I'd always dismissed her behavior as harmless sibling rivalry. Until that barbecue, when I realized she'd been systematically dismantling my marriage while pretending to be my supportive little sister. The signs had been there for months. Roman, my husband of 5 years, had grown distant and critical. He'd started questioning everything about our relationship, my career focus, my independence, even my relationship with our friends. Most devastatingly, he'd been undermining my confidence by comparing me to other women, particularly praising qualities that Delilah possessed. "You know, Delilah really knows how to make a man feel appreciated," he'd say after family dinners. "She's so warm and supportive. She actually listens when people talk." Hey everyone! If you're loving these stories of sisters who fought back against family betrayal, hit that like button and subscribe for more daily tales of justice served ice cold. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from viewers around the world. Now let me tell you exactly how I made my backstabbing sister regret the day she decided to come for my marriage. I should have seen it then, but I was too busy trying to save my marriage to notice that someone was actively sabotaging it. The truth revealed itself that Sunday afternoon at our parents' annual 4th of July barbecue. I'd gone inside to help my mother with the desserts when I glanced out the kitchen window and saw Delilah sitting next to Roman on the patio swing. Her body language was all wrong. Too close, too intimate for a sister-in-law. Then I watched her place her hand high on his thigh, lean in to whisper something in his ear, and when she spotted me watching through the window, she looked directly at me and smiled. It wasn't a guilty smile or an embarrassed smile. It was triumphant. That's when I knew this wasn't an affair that had developed naturally. This was a calculated campaign to steal my husband, and Delilah wanted me to know it. I stayed calm, helped my mother arrange the dessert table, and spent the rest of the barbecue observing their interactions with professional detachment. What I saw made me sick to my stomach and furious in equal measure. Delilah had been studying me, my mannerisms, my sense of humor, even my conversational topics. She was performing a version of me, but one that was more agreeable, more deferential to Roman's opinions, more focused on making him feel important. She'd taken everything Roman loved about me and repackaged it without the independence and professional success that seemed to intimidate him. But more than that, she'd been poisoning his perception of me through 1,000 tiny comments disguised as sisterly concern. "I worry that Anna works too much," I overheard her telling Roman. "She seems so stressed and distant lately. You must feel neglected." "Anna's always been a little cold, even as a kid," she said to my mother while Roman was within earshot. "I hope marriage is helping her become more emotionally available." She was systematically rewriting the narrative of who I was, using her position as my sister to give her criticisms weight and credibility. Roman wasn't just falling for another woman, he was falling for a carefully constructed version of me that made the real me seem inadequate by comparison. That night, I confronted Roman directly. "Are you having an affair with my sister?" I asked as he got ready for bed. He froze, his guilty expression confirming what I already knew. "Anna, it's not what you think. What I think is that you're sleeping with Delilah. Am I wrong?" Roman sat heavily on the edge of our bed, his head in his hands. It's complicated. No, Roman, it's actually very simple. Either you're betraying our marriage vows with my sister, or you're not. Which is it? We haven't crossed that line yet, he said quietly. But Anna, I have feelings for her. Strong feelings. How long? A few months. Maybe longer. I don't know exactly when it started. How long, Roman? Since Christmas. Since your family's Christmas party. 8 months. For 8 months, my husband and my sister had been conducting an emotional affair right under my nose, probably planning for the moment when they could make it physical. What exactly has been happening? I asked, my psychologist training keeping my voice steady despite the hurricane in my chest. Roman looked miserable, but he also looked relieved to finally tell the truth. We've been talking. A lot. She understands me in ways that she listens to me, Anna. She makes me feel important and appreciated. And I don't? You're always so busy with work, with your cases. When you come home, you're mentally somewhere else. Delilah pays attention to me. She asks about my day, my dreams, my feelings. I stared at my husband, this man I'd loved and supported through job changes, family drama, and personal struggles, and realized that Delilah had convinced him that emotional attention was something I'd been withholding from him. Roman, I work demanding hours because I'm building a career that allows us to afford this house, our lifestyle, our future. I've never stopped caring about your dreams or your feelings. But Delilah doesn't have a career or independent responsibilities. Of course she has more time to focus on making you feel special. It's not about time, Anna. It's about how she makes me feel about myself. And how is that? Like I'm enough. Like I don't have to compete with your career or your success to matter to you. There it was. Delilah had identified Roman's insecurity about my professional success and exploited it perfectly. She'd positioned herself as the antidote to his feelings of inadequacy while simultaneously making him feel that those feelings were justified. It was psychological manipulation at its finest, and I was almost impressed by how well she'd executed it. So what happens now? I asked. I don't know, Roman said. I love you, Anna, but I also have feelings for Delilah. I'm confused. You're confused about whether you want to stay married to me or pursue a relationship with my sister? When you put it like that, it sounds terrible. That's because it is terrible, Roman. There's no version of this that isn't terrible. I left him sitting on the bed and went to sleep in the guest room. But I didn't sleep. Instead, I spent the night planning exactly how I was going to handle the situation. By morning, I'd made my decision. I wasn't going to fight for a man who was entertaining the idea of leaving me for my sister. But I also wasn't going to let Delilah destroy my family and steal my husband without consequences. If Delilah wanted to play psychological games, she was about to discover that she'd picked the wrong opponent. The next morning, I called in sick to work and drove to Delilah's apartment. She answered the door in a silk robe that looked suspiciously similar to one I owned, her hair styled the way I'd been wearing mine recently. Anna. What a surprise, she said, but her smile was the same triumphant one I'd seen at the barbecue. We need to talk, I said. Of course. Come in. I just made coffee, that vanilla blend you like. Even her hospitality was performed, designed to show me how much better she was at domestic things than I was. I sat at her kitchen table while she bustled around, playing the role of the caring sister. Finally, I said, Roman told me about your relationship. Delilah's performance faltered for just a moment before she recovered. I'm not sure what you mean. He told me about the emotional affair you've been having since Christmas. He told me he has feelings for you. She sat down across from me, and for the first time in months, I saw the real Delilah, calculating, ambitious, and completely unapologetic. I didn't plan for this to happen, Anna. Bullshit. Excuse me? I said bullshit, Delilah. I've watched you systematically undermine my marriage while pretending to be concerned about my well-being. You've been studying me, copying my mannerisms, and performing a more palatable version of my personality to seduce my husband. This is the most premeditated thing you've ever done. Delilah's mask slipped completely. Maybe if you'd been a better wife, he wouldn't have been so easy to seduce. There it is. The real Delilah. You want the real Delilah? Fine. Roman deserves someone who appreciates him. Someone who puts him first instead of treating him like an accessory to her important career. Someone who makes him feel like a man instead of making him feel inadequate. Someone like you? Yes, someone like me. I would never make Roman feel like he's competing with my job for my attention. I would never be too busy or too tired to listen to his problems. I would make him the center of my world the way a wife should. And you think that makes you a better match for him than his actual wife? I think Roman thinks that. And ultimately, that's what matters. I stared at my sister, this woman who'd shared my childhood, my family, my secrets, and realized that she genuinely believed she was entitled to take whatever she wanted from my life. So what's your plan, Delilah? Seduce him away from me and then what? Marry him? Have the life you think I don't deserve? Roman is going to leave you, Anna. He's just working up the courage to do it. When he does, I'll be there for him. I'll give him the love and support you never could. And our family? Mom and Dad? You think they're going to celebrate you destroying my marriage? I think they'll understand that sometimes people find love in unexpected places. Mom already thinks Roman is too good for you, she's told me so multiple times. That was a lie, but it was designed to hurt me, and it worked. One more question, I said, standing up to leave. When you looked at me through the kitchen window yesterday and smiled while you had your hand on my husband's thigh, was that part of your plan too? Delilah smiled again, the same triumphant expression. I wanted you to know that I could take him whenever I decided to. I wanted you to understand that all your success and independence couldn't protect you from losing the one thing that really mattered. The one thing that really mattered? Your husband. Your marriage. The one area where you couldn't outcompete me. I walked toward her door, then turned back. You're right about one thing, Delilah. You couldn't outcompete me professionally, intellectually, or financially. So you decided to compete in the one arena where you thought I was vulnerable, my marriage. Unfortunately for you, you just confessed your entire strategy to someone who specializes in psychological manipulation. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're about to learn the difference between playing games with someone's emotions and playing games with someone's life. I left Delilah's apartment and spent the rest of the day putting my plan into action. First, I visited a divorce attorney and filed papers. Not because I'd decided definitively to divorce Roman, but because I wanted Delilah to understand the potential consequences of her actions. Second, I scheduled a family dinner with my parents for that weekend and invited both Roman and Delilah. I told them I had an important announcement to make about our marriage. Third, I prepared a psychological profile of Delilah's behavior patterns, complete with recorded conversations and documented examples of her manipulation tactics. This wasn't for any legal purpose, it was for my own clarity and for anyone who might question my interpretation of events. Finally, I did something that went against every instinct I had as both a psychologist and a sister. I decided to let Delilah have exactly what she thought she wanted. The family dinner was held at my parents' house the following Saturday. Everyone was there, my parents, Roman, Delilah, and me. The atmosphere was tense because Roman and I had barely spoken all week, and Delilah was practically vibrating with anticipation. Over dinner, I made my announcement. Roman and I have decided to separate, I said calmly. We'll be filing for divorce next month. The silence was deafening. My mother dropped her fork. My father looked like he'd been punched. Roman stared at me in shock. But Delilah? Delilah tried to look surprised and concerned, but I could see the excitement in her eyes. Anna, honey, are you sure? My mother asked. Marriage is work, but... I'm sure, Mom. Roman has made it clear that he's not happy in our marriage, and I refuse to stay with someone who doesn't want to be with me. Maybe you could try counseling, my father suggested. Dad, Roman is in love with someone else. Counseling can't fix that. Now Roman looked panicked. Anna, I never said. You didn't have to say it, Roman. Your actions spoke louder than words. I turned to look directly at Delilah, who was practically glowing with victory. The thing about getting what you think you want, I said, is that you don't always understand what it actually costs. After dinner, Roman followed me out to my car. Anna, wait. I don't want a divorce. I was confused, but I don't want to lose you. Roman, 3 days ago you told me you had strong feelings for my sister and you were confused about our marriage. Now you're saying you don't want a divorce. Which is it? I want to work on our marriage. I want to try counseling. I made a mistake. What changed your mind? Roman was quiet for a long moment. Losing you. The reality of actually losing you made me realize what I was throwing away. And Delilah? I'll end it. Whatever this was with Delilah, I'll end it completely. I studied his face, using every skill I'd learned in reading people professionally. He seemed sincere, but I also knew that crisis often clarifies priorities in ways that don't last. Roman, I need you to understand something. If we're going to rebuild our marriage, it's going to be on completely different terms. I'm not going to apologize for my career success or make myself smaller to make you feel bigger. If you need a wife who makes you the center of her universe, then Delilah is probably a better choice. I don't want Delilah. I want you. Why? Because I love you. Because you challenge me and inspire me and make me want to be better. Because our life together means something. And when you start feeling neglected or unappreciated again? When Delilah or someone like her starts paying attention to you and making you feel special? It won't happen again. How do I know that? Because I understand now what I was about to lose. I understand that someone who manipulates me into betraying my wife isn't someone I can trust with my heart. That evening, Roman called Delilah and ended their relationship over the phone while I listened. He was direct and final, he was recommitting to our marriage, he would not be seeing her privately anymore, and she needed to respect our decision to work on our relationship. I could hear Delilah's reaction through the phone, shock, anger, and accusations that Roman was making a mistake. She demanded to know if I'd forced him into this decision, if I'd threatened him or manipulated him. No one forced me, Delilah, Roman said. I realized that what we had wasn't love. It was you taking advantage of problems in my marriage, and me being stupid enough to let you. After he hung up, Roman turned to me. What happens now? Now we start marriage counseling. And you start individual therapy to understand why you were vulnerable to that kind of manipulation. And I start individual therapy to understand how I missed what was happening in my own marriage. And Delilah? Delilah learns that actions have consequences. The consequences for Delilah were swift and comprehensive. First, our parents were devastated when they learned the full truth about what had happened. My mother, who'd always favored Delilah slightly, was horrified that her younger daughter had attempted to destroy her sister's marriage. My father, who prided himself on raising daughters with strong moral character, was ashamed and disappointed. Delilah tried to spin the situation as a tragic love story. She and Roman had fallen in love despite trying to fight their feelings, but ultimately chose family loyalty over their happiness. The narrative fell apart when I shared some of the recordings I'd made of our conversations, including her admission that she'd targeted Roman specifically to prove she could take something important from me. Second, word spread through our extended family and social circles. Delilah had always been popular among our relatives, but attempting to steal your sister's husband crossed a line that even her biggest supporters couldn't ignore. Family gatherings became uncomfortable for her, and several cousins and aunts made their disapproval clear. Third, Delilah's social life imploded. Many of our mutual friends were couples who valued marriage and loyalty. When they learned that Delilah had systematically attempted to seduce a married man, her own sister's husband, they distanced themselves from her completely. But the most satisfying consequence was psychological. Delilah had spent months positioning herself as the better version of me, the woman who could give Roman what I couldn't. When Roman chose to stay with me and work on our marriage, it shattered her entire self-concept. She'd built her identity around being the more desirable sister, the one who understood men better, the one who could win any competition for male attention. Roman's rejection of her in favor of rebuilding his marriage with me destroyed that narrative completely. 6 months later, Roman and I were in a much stronger place. Marriage counseling had helped us understand how external manipulation had exploited existing vulnerabilities in our relationship. We'd learned to communicate more directly about his insecurities and my work-life balance, and we'd developed strategies for protecting our marriage from future interference. Roman's individual therapy had helped him understand how his insecurities about my success had made him susceptible to someone who promised to make him feel more important. He'd learned to find validation in his own accomplishments rather than in comparison to mine. My individual therapy had helped me recognize that my focus on professional success had sometimes made me less emotionally available in my marriage, and that I could be more attentive to Roman's needs without sacrificing my career ambitions. As for Delilah, she struggled to rebuild her life after losing her family's trust and her social circle's respect. She moved to another city 6 months after the failed affair, claiming she needed a fresh start. Before she left, she made one last attempt to rewrite the narrative. "I hope you know that Roman would have chosen me if you hadn't manipulated him into staying," she said during our final conversation. "Delilah, Roman did choose you. For 8 months, he chose your emotional manipulation over his marriage vows. But when forced to face the reality of what that choice meant, losing his wife, destroying his family, building a relationship on betrayal, he realized he'd made a mistake. You think you won. I think we both lost something we can't get back. I lost my trust in my sister, and you lost your family's respect and your own integrity. The difference is that I'm rebuilding something meaningful, and you're just running away from the consequences of your choices. Roman will cheat on you again. Men like him always do. Maybe. But it won't be with you, and it won't be because I failed to recognize the warning signs." Delilah left town the next week, and I haven't spoken to her since. 2 years later, Roman and I renewed our wedding vows in a small ceremony with just our closest friends and family. My parents were there, proud of the work we'd done to rebuild our marriage. Delilah was not invited, though she sent a card wishing us all the happiness she hoped we deserved. The card went directly into the trash. Our marriage today is stronger than it was before the affair, not because we survived betrayal, but because we learned to recognize and address the vulnerabilities that made betrayal possible. Roman has learned to communicate his needs directly instead of seeking validation from other women. I've learned to prioritize emotional intimacy alongside professional success. Most importantly, we've both learned to recognize the difference between people who support our marriage and people who seek to exploit its weaknesses for their own benefit. The best revenge against Delilah wasn't destroying her life or publicly humiliating her. The best revenge was building something better from the wreckage she tried to create, and proving that manipulation and betrayal can't compete with genuine love and commitment. Delilah thought she could steal my husband by being a better version of me. Instead, she helped me become a better version of myself, and in the process, she lost everything she'd tried to gain. Roman chose to stay with me not because I forced him to, but because when confronted with the reality of what he was throwing away, he realized that what we had built together was worth fighting for. And Delilah? She learned that you can't build lasting happiness on someone else's foundation. When you try to steal someone else's life, you end up with nothing that's truly yours. 3 years later, I heard through family that Delilah had married a man she'd known for only 6 months, a rebound relationship that she'd rushed into to prove she could find love without stealing it from someone else. The marriage lasted 8 months. Some people never learn that authentic relationships can't be built on lies, manipulation, and betrayal. But that was Delilah's lesson to learn, not mine. My lesson was different: trust your instincts, protect what matters, and never underestimate the power of choosing to rebuild rather than simply seeking revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory is not just surviving betrayal, but emerging from it stronger, wiser, and more committed to the relationships that truly matter. Roman and I are still married, still working on our relationship every day, and still grateful that we chose each other over the easier path of giving up. And Delilah? She's still looking for someone else's life to steal, because she never learned how to build one of her own.